That's not a typo. That's how old you now have to be, on average, to buy your first home in America. 40. You're closer to retirement age than you are to graduating high school when you finally get the keys. In 2010, just 15 years ago, the median first-time buyer was 30. 30. We've lost an entire decade. And it's not because people are lazy or irresponsible or spending too much on avocados. The game has fundamentally changed. The rules got rewritten while nobody was watching. And the numbers I'm about to show you, they're going to make you angry. They should make you angry. Because this isn't just about real estate anymore. This is about the systematic lockout of an entire generation from the primary wealth-building tool that built the American middle class. We're talking about a 2-year increase just from last year. 2 years in 12 months. Let me show you exactly what's happening and why everyone should be paying attention to this crisis.
Here's where it gets wild. First-time buyers now represent only 21% of all home purchases. 21%. Let me put that in perspective. 2 years ago, that number was 32%. We've lost a third of first-time buyers in 24 months. A third. But go back to 2007, before the housing crash, and first-time buyers made up half, 50% of the market. Half. We've dropped from 1 in 2 buyers to 1 in 5. Think about that for a second. The housing market has essentially shut out new entrants. It's like showing up to a poker game where everyone else has been playing for 20 years and has stacks of chips while you're scraping together your buy-in with quarters. According to the National Association of Realtors, this represents a historic low. Not just bad, not just concerning, historic. The worst it's ever been since they started tracking this data. And the trajectory? It's still pointing down.
So how did we end up in this nightmare? Let's rewind the clock and follow the breadcrumbs. In 2010, you could buy your first home at 30. Interest rates were low, hovering around 4%. The median home price was $220,000. Home prices, while recovering from the crash, were actually manageable for regular people with regular jobs. Student loan debt existed, but hadn't reached crisis levels yet. Fast forward to today. The median home price sits at $415,200. That's an 88% increase. Mortgage rates hover above 6%, sometimes pushing 7% depending on your credit. Student loan debt averages $38,000 per borrower, and many carry far more. Wages, sure, they've grown. The median household income went from $60,000 to $75,000, but nowhere near enough to keep pace with housing costs. When home prices jump 88% while incomes only grow 25%, you don't need a degree in economics to see the problem. The math simply doesn't work anymore. A house that cost $200,000 in 2010 now costs $600,000 in hot markets, but the salary that was $50,000 is now maybe $80,000 if you're lucky. See the gap?
Want to know why this is happening? Because someone's winning while first-time buyers are losing. Investor purchases have exploded over the last 5 years. Cash buyers dominate the market. People who already own homes are leveraging their equity to buy second, third, fourth properties. It's become a game of accumulation rather than access. When Zillow and institutional investors started buying up single-family homes by the thousands, they weren't doing it for fun. They saw the trend early: constrained supply, rising demand, and renters with no other option but to pay whatever they ask. And local zoning laws, they've made it nearly impossible to build affordable starter homes in the places where people actually want to live. NIMBYism, not in my backyard, has turned neighborhoods into fortresses. Every city council meeting where someone blocks a new development, every neighborhood that votes against multifamily housing, that's another year added to the average age of first-time buyers. Policy isn't neutral here. It's actively making this worse, protecting existing wealth at the expense of new buyers. But wait, there's more that nobody's talking about in the mainstream coverage. The down payment trap has gotten absolutely vicious. 20% of $415,000 is $83,000. Show me someone in their 20s who has 83 grand sitting around in their savings account. The median savings for Americans under 35 is just $8,000. $8,000. That's not even 10% down. Even with FHA loans requiring just 3.5% down, that's still $14,500 plus closing costs averaging 3% plus moving expenses plus the emergency fund you desperately need because homeownership comes with surprise costs. Your water heater dies, your roof needs repair. And here's the cruel irony that keeps people trapped. While you're grinding away trying to save for that down payment, home prices keep rising at 5 to 7% annually. Bank rates analysis shows that for every year you delay purchasing, you're chasing a moving target that's accelerating away from you. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up every few months. You're running faster, sweating harder, but the finish line keeps moving further away. Eventually, you're 40 years old and finally have enough saved.
Let me paint you a picture of what this actually means in human terms. Meet Sarah. She graduates college at 22 with a decent degree and realistic career prospects. She wants to buy a home, start building equity like her parents told her to, create some stability in her life. But she's got $30,000 in student loans, she's making $45,000 at her entry-level job, and homes in her city start at $500,000. So she rents for 18 years. 18 years of paying someone else's mortgage while they build wealth. 18 years of rent increases that outpace her salary bumps. 18 years of watching her friends, who had family help or inheritance, buy homes and build equity while she treads water. She finally scrapes together enough to buy at 40. By then, she's paid roughly $240,000 in rent, money that vanished into someone else's pocket instead of building her own equity. According to NAR economists, delaying home ownership by just 10 years cost buyers $150,000 in equity over a lifetime. Sarah lost nearly 2 decades. That's real money. That's real wealth. Gone. So who's winning in this rigged game? Existing homeowners are absolutely crushing it. If you bought in 2010 or earlier, you've seen massive appreciation. Your home doubled or tripled in value. The average homeowner who bought before 2012 has gained over $300,000 in equity. $300,000! You're refinancing, pulling out equity, maybe buying rental properties. You're sitting pretty. Wealthy investors are winning big. They're buying homes with all cash, no mortgage contingencies, closing in 7 days. Regular people with jobs and mortgages can't compete with that speed and certainty. Corporations with billion-dollar real estate funds are winning big. They're building rental empires while everyone else is locked out of ownership. Blackstone alone owns over 300,000 housing units. Who's losing? Young people trying to start their financial lives, families trying to put down roots, teachers making $55,000, nurses making $75,000, firefighters, skilled trades workers making decent money, but not enough for this insane market. People of color who face systemic barriers to wealth accumulation and home ownership. And honestly, we're all losing long-term when an entire generation can't access wealth building. That affects the whole economy eventually. Here's what you haven't considered about where this leads. When people can't buy homes until 40, they delay every other major life decision too. Marriage rates drop because couples can't afford to combine households and expensive rentals. Birth rates fall, you can't raise 2 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment forever. Entrepreneurship suffers because nobody has home equity to borrow against to start that business they've been dreaming about. Geographic mobility freezes because people can't afford to move to where better opportunities exist. Communities lose economic and demographic diversity as only the wealthy can afford to live there. Retirement savings take a massive hit because money that should be going to 401ks is going to ever-increasing rent payments instead. And maybe most importantly for the long-term health of our economy, generational wealth dies. The primary way middle-class families built wealth and passed something down to their kids was through home equity. When that pipeline shuts off, inequality compounds with each generation. Fortune's recent analysis warns we're creating a permanent renter class, not by choice, not by preference, by economic force, by design, whether intentional or not. The National Association of Realtors isn't sugarcoating this anymore, which tells you how bad it's gotten. Their chief economist recently called it a crisis of access to the American dream. Those are pretty dramatic words from an organization that makes money when homes sell. Their latest report shows that 81% of renters say home ownership is part of their American dream, but only 33% believe they'll ever achieve it. Bankrate's housing experts are openly discussing whether homeownership is becoming a privilege reserved exclusively for the already wealthy or those with family money.
Even real estate agents, people whose entire income depends on completed home sales, are sounding alarms. One told me off the record, "I'm watching qualified buyers with good jobs and solid savings get outbid by all cash offers every single week. The system is fundamentally broken." Federal Reserve data shows the home ownership rate for people under 35 has created to levels we haven't seen since the 1940s. 39%. The 1940s, when people were recovering from the Great Depression and World War II. That's the historical comparison we're looking at right now. This isn't normal market fluctuation or a temporary correction. This is structural failure happening in real time. So let's ask what everyone's thinking, but afraid to say out loud. Is home ownership still realistic for regular people earning regular wages? Or has it become something only the wealthy, the extremely lucky, or those with significant family money can achieve? 63% of first-time buyers now receive financial help from family, up from 47% just 5 years ago. If the median age keeps climbing 2 years annually, where does this end? 50 years old? 60? At what point do we collectively admit this isn't a housing market, it's a wealth segregation system? And here's the biggest question nobody in power wants to answer. What happens to a society where an entire generation can't build wealth the way their parents did, where economic mobility dies and class becomes permanent and hereditary? Because that's not capitalism, that's feudalism with extra steps and better marketing. You've got landowners and you've got renters, and the gap between them widens every single year. The median net worth of homeowners is 40 times higher than renters. 40 times! Policy could fix this. Zoning reform could fix this. Incentives for starter homes could help. Down payment assistance programs could help. But that requires admitting the problem exists and actually matters.
Let me pull this all together, because the big picture is even more stark than the individual pieces. We've created a perfect storm where home prices rose 88% since 2010. Student debt crushed the ability to save. Investor purchases hit 28% of all sales, eliminating competition from regular buyers. Supply constraints drove prices even higher, with only 1.4 million homes built annually when we need 2 million. And policy utterly failed to adapt to any of it. Each piece feeds the others in a vicious cycle. High prices require bigger down payments, $83,000 for 20%, which take longer to save, during which prices rise even more at 5 to 7% annually, requiring even bigger down payments. It's a trap with no exit. That cycle has pushed the average first-time buyer from 30 years old to 40, from 1 in 2 buyers being first-timers to 1 in 5, from accessible wealth building to nearly impossible wealth building for anyone without existing resources. And the momentum isn't slowing down. Every indicator suggests next year's first-time buyers will be even older, representing an even smaller percentage of the market. We're not fixing this crisis, we're watching it accelerate in real time while politicians talk about everything except this fundamental breakdown.
So here's what we know for certain. The median first-time homebuyer is now 40 years old, closer to Social Security eligibility than high school graduation. They represent just 21% of all purchases, down from 50% less than 20 years ago. The system has fundamentally failed young people, turning home ownership from an achievable middle-class goal into a distant dream that takes 2 decades longer to reach than it did for their parents' generation. If you're under 35 and trying to buy, this means you're not failing. The market has failed you. If you're a parent watching your kids struggle, this means their experience is radically different than yours was. If you're already a homeowner, this means your wealth gap versus non-owners is widening every single day, whether you realize it or not. Where's this heading? Without serious policy intervention, we're looking at a future where home ownership becomes hereditary, something you inherit access to rather than earn through work. Watch for rising political pressure around housing reform. It's coming because it has to. You deserve to know what you're up against.